I'm Elise Orlowski, a senior video director here at Cramer.
And I'm Trip Underwood, a creative director at Cramer.
And at Cramer, we work with so many incredibly fascinating people from all over multiple industries.
We have so many great conversations, many that are just too good to keep to ourselves. So now we're sharing them with the world.
Right here from Cramer Studios.
This is Pivot Points.
Cut.
Okay, back for another episode of Pivot Points. Welcome, Elise, and some of our esteemed guests. To kick it off, I want to talk about 2020 was the year that events went virtual. And for those listening at home, I'm using quotation marks when I say went virtual because honestly,
They've been virtual.
There's always been a strong digital component to the type of events that we do. But when the pandemic hit, it just kind of forced us to rethink how those tools are used, reevaluate how they're used, and get innovative with how they're used. Because at the end of the day, they really just are tools that we have been using. And to talk a little about that, we have two master craftspeople of said tools. We have Pat Leonard and Vinny Higgins. Welcome to the show, guys. Just want to ask kind of off the bat, as someone that's been working in this medium for a long time and then really had your jobs change, ramp up. I was about to say ramp down, but that never happened. Change, ramp up again in the past 18 months. My understanding is you've seen a lot or heard a lot of ideas about what virtual communications involve, what the platforms use, and all that kind of stuff. Curious as to what are some of the biggest misconceptions there are out there in terms of what digital and virtual communication means in this new hybrid world when it comes to the event space.
Yeah, well, so first of all, it's definitely been a crazy ride since, March 2020. As you mentioned before, we've been doing virtual for 10 plus years, webcasts, virtual events, and it's been, ebbs and flows. This past year, now that everything went virtual, I think the most common misconception is that there's some sort of, magic, bullet that's going to solve all the client's problems. That there's a platform that's going to totally recreate the on-site event experience, and that for whatever reason, the tool that we're using for webcast is going to not have the same issues that the rest of the internet has.
We do not control the internet.
Right, we do not control the internet.
You
right.
don't?
We do everything we can to, to control what we can control. Yeah. But there obviously, we've all been doing this now for 18 plus months. We know that there are issues that we can't control. So I think those are the big things. That A, there's something that's going to totally replicate the on-site experience, and two, that we're operating in a internet that is different from everybody else's.
So
internet.
Connectivity issues,
yes.
audio hiccups, that kind of
Sure.
stuff is
Yeah.
still very much part of the program. And you see that, I think, on national broadcast as well.
Yeah.
It's just different from declining when now I'm paying for it, so now I don't think the internet should behave that way.
Right.
Right.
What are some of those things that are a misconception that it might be the platform or the production, but it's actually we're at the mercy of the internet? What are some of those things?
Yeah, just a simple thing like connection with the speaker. If their audio drops out, or they're on mute, which happens a couple times.
Never.
That happens. It's a real world experience, and sometimes in the live environment, it actually proves that you are live. So obviously we don't want to be on mute, but we try to just explain these things happen in regular TV broadcasts, and they do this every single day for a lot longer than the virtual event space has been out there. So.
I do think there's a bit of a kind of a human element or something that humanizes the broadcast and the speaker when you do run into those little glitches that we're all used to. It makes it feel like, for the audience, it does make you feel more like you're part of, like witnessing a tiny hiccup like that makes you feel like you're part of the experience with the people on site and at home, which I think is again, an unintended connection point, but a connection point nevertheless. That there's a little bit of a silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, and proves that you're live.
Yes, which is a huge thing. That if it goes off without a hitch too well, which is ultimately what you're looking for, because we've had questions on some of the things. Someone's like, "Is this really live?" Which, on one hand, is a great compliment to the work you guys are doing, but on the other hand, you want to always be making sure that it feels live because you want that audience at home to have that live connection with the content that's being broadcast. So that's always trying to make those two feel concurrent, both feel live and then feel like it's live at home as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, even, and this really doesn't really fall in our world that much, but even, when you're doing a virtual meeting, right? And, someone's kid walks in the room or their dog's in the room. So I agree. Anything like that does make you feel more connected to the person, right?
Yeah, especially when it's a hiccup as opposed to an extended belch,
Mistake.
for lack of
Sure. Right. Yeah.
A dog barking once, cute kind of thing. A dog that won't shut up, like
You're like,
annoying, and they're
Annoying,
interfering
yes.
with the content. Totally.
I'm curious. So, obviously we've been doing virtual for a long time, but I think now we've just seen the rise of virtual, which is funny because a lot of people are like, it's so new. But what have you guys seen in terms of like virtual and the advancements in technology over the past 18 months? Are there things that like you've seen or been able to do that you really weren't able to do when it was kind of, we were doing events and it was really 50-50 or, virtual was kind of maybe smaller?
Yeah, well, the platforms have definitely evolved. I was just having this conversation actually with another coworker, and from, the start of this, when everyone was still trying to figure it out, the platforms that everyone went to, at first, those old kind of legacy platforms, they're very kind of bulky, heavy platforms that, they're not very flexible, not very customizable. They do what they do well, but it's kind of like a templated thing that it really isn't like the greatest, user experience, but it works, right? So I think that the platforms have really evolved where now they're trying to solve for that engagement problem. They look a lot, slicker looking. They allow us to have presenter attendee, communication, which the older platforms didn't allow for that. So I think that's the biggest thing really is allowing for the people watching the program to actually interact with the presenters. That's something that we couldn't do before very easily. And now it seems like it's kind of being a standard, addition to these platforms coming out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's not just like a one-way experience anymore or like watching TV. It's like, I feel like now more than ever, everyone wants a very interactive experience.
Exactly.
What do you think that are, so like in terms of platform and production, I know we've talked about those are two very separate entities. What do you think are some of the common misconceptions between like platform and technology and then how it affects production?
Right, because not to cut, but I've had clients that have been over the moon about a platform that they saw someone using. And that as they're describing it to me, what it is they loved about what they saw, I'm like, that's not a platform. That's production. Like there was great production on that, whereas the platform could have been agnostic for the things they were describing. So I do think there's a big misconception amongst some of the people working or new to this industry of what is production, what is platform. And I wonder if you guys, could share a little bit about where some of the big guardrails are and anywhere you've seen either advance or things that clients should know about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way I like to explain it is the platform is the wrapper. It's the home base of where all your content lives. You can customize it, brand it, and then the production is really what's in that video player, what's getting broadcasted out to the world. And, we've had clients that, sometimes it's hard to distinguish that because they're like, oh, we saw these beautiful graphics and name banner, lower third graphics, and they're talking about platform, like, oh, well, we can do that virtually with any platform through our production studios. So I think that's the easiest way to distinguish it is platform is the wrapper and production is everything that's being sent out through that platform.
And, go ahead, Vincent.
No, you're exactly right. And it's funny, we were at the beginning of this, back March, April 2020, that's when we were struggling internally how to communicate and, educate our own, internal staff. That's exactly the terminology that we came up with, right? The wrapper and then, what's inside the wrapper. So it's a great way to describe it.
Blaming it on the clients. I'm guilty of it too. When we first started, I was like, oh, that looks awesome. We should use that platform all the time. It's like, oh no, that's our production crew. They could do that on everything except for Zoom practically at this point.
And that's, I think, really what makes the great thing about Cramer is that we are, platform technology agnostic. And it really, at the end of the day, our sweet spot is making sure that these broadcasts are, look great and are successful, and and also that, we make sure the technology works, of course, but the creating that really nice looking broadcast, I think we do such a good job of that day in and day out.
One of the areas I seen that I think has grown significantly in this 18 months, I'd love to hear your guys' take on it, is the quality of remote broadcasts. That used to be a much heavier lift than it feels like it is today. So do you guys am I wrong in that? Did stuff get better, or are we as an industry just getting better at having the right equipment and servers to support that kind of the remote feeds that now seem crisper, cleaner, less drop, all that stuff that used to make you very nervous, I feel like doesn't happen as much, and setting it up feels a lot easier, at least on my end.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably a combination of both. Obviously technology has advanced over the years, but I think a lot of the technology has been optimized differently purely for that experience. The workflow of how we optimize our gear, and it wasn't overnight for us, but we figured out the most efficient workflow to really get that high quality experience. So you wouldn't even think that someone's in their living room or wherever. But then on the other hand of that, the production piece of it, I think if you look in our various broadcast hubs, that took a lot of, testing and working through different workflows to really figure out the best solution.
And we didn't even have broadcast hubs, plural, if I recall. Prior to before, we had a singular hub because that's all that our clients really needed, the workflow. And then when suddenly everyone was doing these remote things, we had to expand as well. So necessity is kind of the mother of invention, as they say. So I get that also, how it, chicken or egg. But
what do you think? So speaking of kind of like new landscapes and technology evolving, what, looking into when we start to get back into live, maybe the hybrid model, all of that stuff, how do you think that this technology is going to adapt or change or be incorporated into events?
Well, first of all, virtual is not going away. For a lot of the live events that we did prior to this, we were doing a webcast of the general session or the keynotes, right? Now I think that every live program, is going to have a virtual component.
And a major
virtual component, right? And that's not just going to be streaming the general session. It's going to be streaming, the breakouts, the auxiliary events that are going on, the expo centers. So I think the platforms, as they, evolve to support hybrid, it's all about how much content they can support, right? How easy it is to access the content. I think that what remains to be seen really is if the platforms are going to really be able to support the virtual attendee and in-person attendee, networking, right? Which
the question that we always get, how do we do networking?
The number one request with the least obvious answer.
Right. And I think that, that still I don't think has been solved well. Maybe, that I think that's the area where there's the biggest potential, right? If somebody can solve that problem, or people might just realize, that really isn't a problem worth solving, right? People don't want to interact, with the virtual opponent, attendees and the, in-person attendees. Maybe it's just two separate experiences. But I think the key really is how much content and how easy it is to access that content, because we're going to want to put every possible thing from that in-person event online, right? I think.
Yeah, it's that idea of what used to be kind of this secondary of we're focusing on this live event, and then maybe we'll have a few people join here and there. And now I feel like that's flipped, because for some of the clients I worked with that were used to doing in person, forced to go virtual, there were the bumps in the roads and some of the hiccups with the virtual programming, but what they fell in love with was the reach. These are events that used to have 1,000 people in person and had now, 5,000 people online. So they're just not going to let go of that. So I think it then becomes this marrying of the content and deciding where to kind of focus your energy in terms of live and then virtual. And then I think as the technology gets better, that'll become easier. And then you'll just see a more seamless connection of the two.
Yeah.
Except for networking. I do agree that's going to be this. But, there should be something that's unique to live, that I think that's one of the things you're never going to get away with. So.
Right, and there's a lot of things that are unique to virtual that 100%. You can't get with live. So I think, seeing the benefit of both is super essential.
A word I can never say, being anonymous, that idea of you can have your camera off and be doing other things, that's a huge benefit to that. In the same way of, being able to talk to someone face to face about content you just saw, and then go to the hotel bar with them and get a drink and talk it over more. That's another very unique to live. That sometimes there's certain things that just at least now can't be replicated.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I see, I think ultimately what's going to happen is the virtual component is going to be used as a way to drive attendance, to the in real life event, right?
Yeah.
Don't
you want to be here?
Right. Don't you want to be here? Look at what
Yeah.
you're missing. Look at this cocktail, party. Look at all these networking opportunities. If you solve for networking online and you make it as easy to network online as it is in person, then, there used to be this fear of cannibalizing the in-person event with the virtual event. I think it's clear that that's not the case.
Which we
right?
talked about, like streaming live sports makes you want to go to the
It
game
makes
that
you want
much
to go to
more.
the game even more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think by putting as much content as you can online, showing all the fun that you're missing, the networking opportunities you're missing, that'll help drive attendance in the future.
It really becomes like a promotional tool for the event experience itself. If you're doing something annually, maybe this is your first year, maybe you're new, it's a user conference, you're new to the product or you're new to the company or whatnot. There's an idea of like, we want you to have this content available to you easily, cost effectively. But if, you really fall in love with it, next year we'll see you in Vegas or wherever it is being held. I think that's like really a nice secondary value of all this that companies can think of.
Yeah.
And sponsorship. That was another thing we talked about. There's like different sponsoring opportunities within virtual, I think is like really, really untapped potential for clients.
Yeah. Ultimately, the technology allows the production to live on, the content to live on, and also that you have an actual platform so that you do want to go back to the live event experience year after year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Well, that's about all the time we have for you. Guys are in high demand in this building, so I don't want to take up any more of your time.
Thank you for joining
Yeah,
us.
thanks so much
thanks
for
for
joining
having
us.
us.
Yeah,
Thanks for
great.
having us.
And
This was
then
great.
thanks to everyone watching and listening at home. This is another episode of Pivot Points.